The Council world burned, its spires shattered, its fleets reduced to drifting wreckage, its leaders silenced forever. What had once been the proud heart of the galaxy was now a tomb, and in that silence, the galaxy finally understood. Humanity's patience was gone, and its wrath had no equal. From one end of the stars to the other, fear spread like fire. Empires that had once mocked humanity now trembled. Worlds that had once turned away from their cries now whispered prayers into the void. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy had no rulers, no council, no order, only the shadow of humanity's vengeance looming over all. But vengeance comes with its own cost. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Commander Adrian Cale stood alone. The fires of the Council world reflected in his eyes. He had carried humanity's grief across the stars. He had answered their silence with fire, yet in that fire, he wondered what remained of the species he loved. Were they still builders, dreamers, explorers? Or had they become something darker? Something that could never return to what it once was? The survivors of alien cruelty did not ask those questions. They looked to humanity with awe and devotion. Freed slaves bowed before human soldiers, whispering thanks through tears. Worlds long forgotten welcomed the fleets not as conquerors but as liberators. Yet still there was fear, because even as humanity saved, it destroyed. Even as it freed, it burned. And the galaxy began to realize that salvation and judgment had become the same thing. In the ashes of the council chamber, humanity declared its truth. There would be no new council. There would be no return to the old order. Instead, there would be memory. Every world, every empire, every species would remember what it meant to mock humanity, and they would never dare again. The broadcast carried this vow across the galaxy, a voice that shook every world. We are not weak. We are not prey. We are the fire you lit with your cruelty, and we will burn in memory forever. The old empires collapsed in silence. The Krith were gone. The Valor shattered, the Darnos erased, the Council itself destroyed. In their place rose a void, a vacuum of power so vast that the galaxy itself seemed to teeter on the edge of chaos. And into that void stepped humanity, not as rulers by ambition, but as rulers by inevitability. For years to come, children of alien species would whisper of the day the stars trembled. They would tell stories of dreadnoughts black as night, of soldiers with eyes burning like fire, of a species that endured humiliation and answered with a storm that no empire could survive. Do not anger the humans, they whispered, for their silence is more dangerous than their rage. And yet beyond the flames of vengeance, shadows stirred on the edges of known space. Ancient watchers turned their gaze toward humanity, beings older than the Council, older than the empires that mocked Earth. They had seen civilizations rise and fall like sparks in the void, and now they saw something new, a species that endured, a species that transformed grief into fury, silence into fire, a species that had become more than prey. Commander Cale knew the war was not truly over. The Council was gone, but the galaxy was vast. The storm of humanity's wrath had carved its mark. But storms always draw the attention of greater forces. And somewhere, in the dark between the stars, something waited. Something that would test not just humanity's fury, but its very soul. Still in this moment, in the silence after the fire, humanity stood unbroken. No longer ignored, no longer mocked, no longer dismissed. Every empire that once laughed was now ash. Every species that once sneered now whispered in fear. And the galaxy itself would carry that memory forever. Because legends are not born in peace. They are forged in wrath, and this legend was carved in fire. The legend of humanity's patience shattering. The legend of humanity's vengeance rising. The legend of the day the stars trembled. And the truth that no species would ever forget. The galaxy had watched the fall of the Darnos with disbelief. For centuries, the Slaver Empire had been untouchable, their fleets vast, their cruelty legendary, and yet, in a matter of weeks, humanity had erased them from the stars. What once seemed impossible was now undeniable. Humanity's wrath had no equal. The other empires began to tremble. The Krith, who once poisoned human oceans for sport, gathered their fleets at the edge of their territory. The Valar, broken and scattered, tried to rebuild their strength behind desperate walls of defense. Even the mighty Drannith Confederacy, smug rulers of vast trading routes, whispered their fear behind closed doors. But whispers did not save them. Because humanity was not done, humanity was only beginning. The hidden armadas that had waited in silence for generations now roared across the stars. Dreadnoughts the size of cities moved with terrifying precision. Every strike carried purpose, every victory carried memory. The Krith were the first to fall. Their poisoned worlds burned beneath human bombardments. Their fleets scattered like ash in a storm. The oceans they had once defiled boiled with fire as humanity repaid every cruelty with vengeance multiplied 100-fold. Then came the Valar. They had thought to fortify their borders, to hold the line with sheer numbers. But when humanity's fleets arrived, the numbers meant nothing. The Nemesis alone tore apart half their armada in a single battle. The rest fled into the void, abandoning their people to whatever fate awaited them. The fate was fire. Across the galaxy, entire empires collapsed like dying stars. Worlds that had once mocked the humans now broadcast desperate messages of surrender. But no surrender was accepted. Not yet. Humanity did not fight for peace, they fought for memory, for justice. For the endless grief carried by every survivor who had once begged the Council for help. And so the fires spread. In the council chambers, chaos reigned. Delegates shouted, argued, begged for a united response, but none could agree. Fear strangled their voices. The question loomed over them all. If even the mighty Darnos and Krith had fallen, what hope was left for anyone else? Some demanded negotiation, others demanded war. But when a scout ship limped into the council station with recordings of the battles, the debate fell silent. The footage showed human fleets descending like shadows, dreadnoughts casting worlds into eclipse, alien admirals shouting in panic, fleets breaking apart in hours, and finally, a broadcast from Commander Adrian Kale himself, his voice calm, his eyes cold. We asked for peace. You gave us chains. Now we bring fire. The galaxy had never seen vengeance so absolute. It was not conquest, it was extermination. Not for resources, not for power, but for justice. The kind of justice that burned hotter than suns. And in that fire, empires died. But vengeance carries its own weight. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Kale watched the destruction unfold. He did not smile, he did not celebrate. Around him, his officers carried out their duties with grim efficiency. Yet in their eyes burned the same unshakable resolve. They were not fighting for glory. They were fighting for the voices of the dead, for Epsilon Prime, for Korath, for Andros IV, and for every cry the galaxy had ignored. Still, doubts began to whisper even among humanity's own. How far would they go? Would they stop when justice was served, or would wrath consume them all? Kale himself carried that question like a shadow. Each world that burned weighed heavier on his soul. But when he looked at the survivors of alien cruelty, broken, scarred, hollow, he knew the answer was not his to choose. It belonged to humanity as a whole, and humanity had chosen vengeance. The collapse spread faster than anyone could believe. Trade routes vanished, entire economies crumbled. Refugees flooded into council space, carrying stories of human fleets appearing from the void. Stories of planets burned for their crimes, of soldiers who fought with inhuman precision, and everywhere, the same chilling phrase whispered across the stars. Humanity has awakened. The old order of the galaxy was dying. Its empires, its powers, its pride, all consumed by the storm they had created. And in its place rose something new, a truth no one could deny that the species once mocked, once dismissed, once enslaved, had become the fire at the center of everything. And the fire was still spreading. The council world had always been untouchable. It was the shining jewel of the galaxy, the hub of trade, diplomacy, and power. The elder races boasted that no fleet had ever breached its defenses. No invader had ever dared to bring war to its skies. It was the one place where arrogance seemed eternal. But that illusion ended the day humanity arrived. From the void came the Armada, dreadnoughts vast as cities, cruisers bristling with weapons, carriers unleashing endless waves of strikecraft. At their head loomed the Nemesis, her black hull eclipsing starlight. Her cannons glowing like suns ready to rise, the defenders scrambled, their fleets forming a wall of silver light across the skies. But even as they prepared, fear gripped them, because every soldier, every admiral, every citizen had heard the stories. Stories of Darnos worlds reduced to ash, of Krith oceans boiling, of Valar fleets erased in hours. And now, that storm had come for them. The first salvo shattered the illusion of safety. Human cannons tore through the outer rings of defense. Stations exploded like fragile glass, debris raining across the atmosphere. Alien admirals screamed orders, but their formations broke almost instantly, because the humans did not fight as others did. They did not posture, they did not hesitate. They struck with precision, with fury, with the weight of centuries pressing every shot. From the council chambers below, delegates watched in horror as the sky burned. The great spires of their capital trembled with the shock waves of orbital bombardments. Screens lit with desperate messages. Defenses collapsing at Sector 9. Admiral dead, Fleet Command unresponsive. They're breaking through, and above it all, one broadcast filled every channel. A human voice, calm and unshakable. We warned you. You never listened. This is your judgment. Panic spread across the city. Citizens flooded the streets, rushing toward bunkers that could not save them. The Council's armies tried to form lines of defense, but when human dropships descended, black-armored soldiers pouring into the plazas, the fight was over before it began. They moved like shadows, every strike efficient, every motion filled with cold purpose. They were not conquerors, they were executioners. In the great council chamber itself, the delegates huddled in terror. These were the same leaders who had once laughed at humanity's pleas, who had dismissed their cries for justice as weakness. Now their voices were shrill, desperate, pleading for negotiations that would never come. One elder shouted, "We are the council! You cannot destroy us, we are the galaxy's order!" But the doors thundered open, and there stood Commander Adrian Kale, flanked by human soldiers, his face grim, his eyes burning with cold fire. He did not shout. He did not rage. He simply said, "Your order is over." The soldiers raised their weapons. The chamber erupted with screams, and when the gunfire ended, silence fell. A silence heavier than any that had come before. Above, the battle in orbit turned into massacre. Council fleets scattered, their proud banners torn apart, their defenses broken. No one remembered the day the council world had been founded, but all would remember the day it fell, from one end of the galaxy to the other. Transmissions carried the same message. The seat of galactic power was burning. The stars themselves seemed to tremble at the fury unleashed. No species laughed now, no voice mocked, there was only fear, and the whisper that echoed in every shadow. Humanity cannot be stopped. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Kale stood in silence through the viewport. He watched the council city burn. He thought of Epsilon Prime, of Andros IV, of every world abandoned by the council's arrogance. And though his heart was heavy, his voice was steady. They thought we would stay silent forever. Now they will never forget our voice. But vengeance is a tide that does not easily recede. Even as the council world lay in ruins, messages poured in from across the stars, terrified rulers begging for mercy, promising tribute, swearing loyalty. Yet none of it mattered, because humanity was not fighting for gold or for power. They were fighting for memory, and memory demanded fire. The galaxy did not notice the day humanity's silence ended. Not at first. For them it was just another act of cruelty, just another atrocity written into the endless archives of galactic history. But for humanity it was the final wound, the last insult. The spark that set centuries of silence ablaze. Andros had already burned, its cities reduced to craters, its oceans boiling with radiation, its survivors scattered as refugees across distant colonies. But when the Valar returned to finish what they had begun, something inside humanity broke. Their fleets descended upon the shattered world, slaughtering the last survivors, torching the soil, and broadcasting their laughter across every channel. For the galaxy, it was proof of power. For humanity, it was the last straw. On Earth, the council chambers shook with anger. Every leader, every general, every survivor filled the vast hall. The walls themselves seemed to tremble with the weight of grief and fury. No one spoke at first. Then Commander Adrian Kale rose to his feet. His voice was not loud, but it carried like thunder. "Mercy is over," he said. And in that moment, 1,000 years of human patience turned into fire. Across the hidden shipyards, the signal spread like lightning. Engines roared to life. Weapons that had slept for decades flared with light. Thousands of ships, frigates, destroyers, cruisers, dreadnoughts the size of cities, rose from the shadows of asteroids and moons. No longer training, no longer waiting, they were ready. And their target was clear. The galaxy did not know what was coming. On the Valar homeworld, nobles feasted and laughed, boasting of their triumph at Andros IV. They did not see the human fleets gathering beyond the edge of their stars. They did not feel the weight of vengeance approaching. They only heard the first warning when their outer colonies began to vanish. It started as whispers, a mining station gone silent, a trade convoy missing without a trace, Entire settlements erased from existence in the span of hours. The Valar Council dismissed it as pirates, as chance, as the chaos of the frontier. But survivors, few and broken, spoke of shadows in the void. Shadows shaped like human ships, larger and darker than anything they had ever seen. Within weeks, the first battle erupted at Calros Station. The Valar sent a fleet of 50 warships to crush what they thought was a human raid. Only 3 returned, their captains shaking, their eyes wide with terror. "They are everywhere," one whispered. Everywhere at once, machines of fire and silence. The council laughed at their fear. But the laughter died when humanity finally revealed itself. From the dark came the dreadnought Nemesis, the pride of humanity's hidden armada. Its hull glistened black, its cannons glowing like suns with a single salvo. It tore apart the Valar capital fleet. Millions watched as their mighty defenses shattered like glass for the first time. The galaxy saw the blade that humanity had sharpened in silence, and they understood too late that it had been pointed at their hearts all along. Across the stars, transmissions poured in, humans speaking not in diplomacy, not in pleading, but in finality. "We asked for peace," one broadcast declared. "You gave us chains." "We asked for justice," another voice cried. "You gave us silence. Now we give you war." The Valar Empire began to collapse in weeks. Worlds burned, fleets crumbled, and humanity advanced with the precision of a storm. There was no bargaining, no negotiation, no surrender accepted. Every world that had once carried human slaves was marked in fire. Every general who had once laughed at humanity's weakness was executed live across the stars. And the galaxy watched, silent at last, as the prey they had mocked became the predator. But vengeance has a weight of its own as the war raged. Voices within humanity whispered of caution. How far would they go? Would they destroy not only their enemies but themselves? Commander Cal stood at the bridge of the Nemesis, watching entire worlds burn beneath his fleet's fire. And in his heart he knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The Council of Worlds met in panic. Alien delegates shouted, argued, and begged for someone to stop the humans. But no one moved, no one dared. The silence of humanity was gone. And in its place stood something the galaxy had never seen before. A fury older than stars, a vengeance that would not stop until every enemy lay in ashes. The galaxy had grown used to human silence, but silence had become fire. And now that fire swept across the stars with unstoppable fury. The first true strike came at Darnos, the slaver empire that once stole human children and sold them in chains. For centuries, the Darnos thrived on cruelty, building palaces with the profits of misery. They believed humanity too weak, too soft to ever resist. They did not see the human fleets until it was too late. From the void emerged the Nemesis and her sisters, dreadnoughts black as midnight, their hulls bristling with weapons glowing like suns. Alongside them came destroyers, cruisers, carriers, a storm of steel and vengeance. The Darnos orbital fleets rushed to meet them, confident in their numbers. But numbers meant nothing before the fury of humanity. The first volley tore apart half their defenses. Plasma storms erupted across the sky. Station shields shattered, and the stars themselves seemed to burn. The Darnos panicked, their admirals screaming orders that no longer mattered. Because humanity had not come for victory, they had come for judgment. On the surface of the Darnos capital, citizens watched in horror as the skies lit with fire. Their leaders fled into bunkers, broadcasting pleas for mercy. But humanity's broadcasts drowned them out. Every channel, every frequency carried the same cold voice. For the children you stole, for the blood you spilled, for the mercy you mocked. Humanity has come. Cities were reduced to rubble, palaces of cruelty toppled, slave camps thrown open as soldiers in black armor stormed the gates. The liberated humans did not weep. They did not cheer. They simply stared at their rescuers, eyes hollow as if afraid to believe it was real. Commander Adrian Cale stood among them, his armor scarred, his face grim. He said only 2 words to the freed prisoners. Never again. But humanity's vengeance did not stop there. The fleets moved like wildfire, striking world after world, burning through Darnos territory with terrifying precision. Each victory was not only military, it was symbolic. Every planet fell as repayment for a wound inflicted. Every station destroyed was a mark of justice carved into the stars. And the galaxy watched in silence. The species who once laughed at humanity now trembled. The silence of the council chambers was not mercy. It was fear. Rumors spread like infection. Stories of dreadnoughts that could erase cities in a single strike. Of human soldiers who fought with eyes glowing like their ancestors burned inside them. Of fleets that moved like shadows striking from nowhere, vanishing before defenders could respond. And at the heart of it all was a truth no one wanted to admit. The humans were no longer prey, they had become the predators. Still, some empires tried to resist. The Valar rallied their remaining fleets, forming a blockade at the edge of their space. They believed their numbers, their experience, their centuries of dominance would protect them. But when humanity's armada arrived, their defenses collapsed within hours. Ships that once represented terror broke like glass before the storm. The survivors fled, broadcasting desperate pleas. The humans cannot be stopped. And so the galaxy began to change. Where once human diplomats were mocked, now alien leaders whispered their names in fear. Where once their silence was taken for weakness, now every silence became a warning. The council met in panic, voices trembling as they debated what to do. Negotiate, some demanded. Unite against them, others insisted, but none dared move because deep down, they all knew the truth. Humanity's patience had ended, and once patience turns to wrath, nothing can stand in its path. On the bridge of the Nemesis, Commander Kale stood before the glowing expanse of space. His officers awaited orders, their faces grim but resolute. He did not raise his voice, he did not need to. "We move to the next system," he said. The crew obeyed without hesitation. They all understood. This was no war of conquest, no war of ambition. It was a war of memory, a war to carve into history that humanity would never be mocked again. As the dreadnoughts advanced, Kyle watched the stars burn. He did not smile. He did not revel in the destruction. For him, vengeance was not joy, it was duty. But somewhere in the silence between battles, he wondered how far humanity would go, and whether when the fire finally ended, there would be anything left of who they once were. The galaxy never noticed the silence of humanity. At first, the newcomers from Earth were seen as harmless, a young species stumbling into the vast stage of interstellar politics. They brought trade, they brought words of peace, they brought curiosity and hope. The elder species, the ancient empires, watched them with condescension, smiling at the small, fragile beings who thought themselves equals. At the Galactic Council, the humans were mocked openly. When they spoke of fairness, the others laughed. When they demanded justice for the raids on their ships, the Council waved them away. When they offered treaties, their words were dismissed, treated as the chatter of children. And yet humanity did not lash out. They endured, and in enduring, they waited. The silence stretched across decades. Human colonies spread to new stars, only to be attacked by raiders. Ignored by those sworn to uphold galactic law, entire families vanished into the slave markets of the Darnos, their cries unanswered. Trade convoys were ambushed, their wreckage left drifting in cold space while the Krith scavengers grew rich. Every injustice was recorded, remembered, carried like burning coals in the hearts of those who survived. But the humans never declared war, they swallowed their rage, buried their grief and spoke of peace, and the galaxy mistook this silence for weakness. The massacre at Epsilon Prime was the first great wound. An entire colony, 200,000 men, women and children, erased in a single night. The attackers, a coalition of minor species seeking to teach humans their place, bragged about it in council halls. And yet the humans did not retaliate. They gathered their dead, rebuilt their colony, and bowed their heads. The council whispered, "See, they are too afraid to fight back." But the survivors whispered something else. Not yet. When the colonies at Korath were seized by the Valar, their people enslaved in mines of living crystal, humanity endured again. When the fleets above Andros IV were annihilated in an unprovoked bombardment, humanity grieved in silence, each tragedy stacked upon the last. Each loss carved deeper scars into the collective memory of the species. But instead of collapsing, humanity grew harder, sharper, like steel placed in the fire again and again. The galaxy saw only the surface, weak, fragile, silent. They never saw the forges hidden deep within asteroid fields. They never heard the hum of vast shipyards cloaked in darkness. They never noticed the children who were trained not only in books but in war, generations raised with a single lesson whispered from parent to child. One day, enough will be enough. The aliens did not understand patience. They thought war was rage, immediate and blind. They did not know that humanity's silence was not surrender. but preparation. And so they laughed. They laughed when humans demanded justice for Epsilon Prime. They laughed when the humans begged for the return of their enslaved children. They laughed when Earth's ambassador stood in the grand chamber and said, with trembling voice, "There will come a day when our silence ends." The laughter echoed like thunder through the halls. But somewhere in that laughter a shadow was born. The silence of humanity became a weight pressing down upon the galaxy. Whispers spread, rumors of human colonies training secret armies, of fleets vanishing into deep space, of strange signals echoing from the edge of known stars. The rumors were ignored, dismissed as desperation from a broken people. But the survivors knew better. They knew the silence was the sharpening of a blade. And when that blade was drawn, it would not stop until it had cut through every enemy who had ever mocked them. On a distant outpost, a fleet commander named Adrian Kale watched the ruins of Andros IV smoldering below. Millions dead, their voices forever silenced. He did not speak as the council broadcast its usual condolences. He did not flinch as alien leaders declared the tragedy unfortunate but necessary. Instead, he stood at the viewport of his ship, eyes locked on the burning world, and at last, he whispered the words that every human had carried inside their hearts for decades. Enough. Humanity's silence had become a mystery. For decades, the galaxy had expected them to break. Every insult, every attack, every atrocity was designed to provoke a response. And yet the humans remained quiet, their diplomats bowing their heads, their fleets retreating, their colonies rebuilding in silence. The galaxy called it weakness, but in truth, it was something far more dangerous. Beneath the surface, humanity was changing. The pain of each loss did not fade. It hardened into purpose. Children who once studied history and science now studied strategy and survival. Every classroom became both a place of learning and a place of training. On distant colonies, young cadets marched under alien suns, chanting in unison, "Never again." Every soldier, every worker, every scientist carried the weight of vengeance in their hearts. Far from the eyes of the council, deep in the asteroid fields of the Carthane belt, the truth was being forged. Massive shipyards stretched for miles, hidden in the darkness. The galaxy thought humanity's fleets were pitiful, outdated, barely capable of defending themselves. But those fleets were only what the galaxy was meant to see. The real strength was being built in silence. Warships larger than anything humanity had ever constructed before, bristling with weapons designed not for defense but for annihilation, engines tested in secret, weapons fired only into the empty void where no ears could hear. The patience of humanity was not peace, it was a mask. Behind that mask they counted every loss, every humiliation, every scream of their enslaved children. When the Valar chained humans in the crystal mines of Korath, the images were burned into the memory of every soldier. When the Krith poisoned the oceans of Alara Prime, turning an entire colony into a grave, humanity marked the day in silence. Every atrocity became fuel. Every injustice became fire. The galaxy thought the humans were broken, but they were only waiting for the blade to be sharp enough. In the council halls, alien leaders laughed as they always had. One delegate from the Dranith Confederacy sneered, "Humans bark but never bite." The chamber roared with amusement, but far away in the silence of space, Commander Adrian Kale stood aboard a dreadnought still under construction. The ship's frame was incomplete, its weapons not yet calibrated, but already it radiated power. He placed his hand on the cold metal and whispered. Soon, the suspense grew not only in human hearts but across the galaxy. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the humans were building fleets larger than entire empires. Others whispered of secret weapons, of engines that bent the laws of physics. The council dismissed these as paranoia. But traitors spoke of human convoys vanishing into uncharted systems, never returning. Scouts swore they had seen vast structures glimmering in the darkness before being chased away by patrols that should not exist. Still the galaxy mocked, still they pushed. The Andros IV bombardment was the final insult. An unprovoked attack that reduced a thriving human colony to ash in a single night. Millions dead, billions in damage, and yet once again, the humans bowed their heads in council chambers. Their ambassador's voice trembled as he demanded justice. The answer came in cold laughter. A Valar general leaned forward and hissed, "If you cannot defend yourselves, perhaps you do not deserve to exist." The chamber erupted with amusement. The humans walked away in silence, but inside, That silence had become something else, something alive, something hungry. Every worker in the hidden shipyards labored harder. Every soldier trained longer. Every scientist pushed further. Humanity was no longer preparing for survival. They were preparing for revenge. In the cold expanse of deep space, the first completed dreadnoughts floated in silence. Their hulls painted black, their weapons sleeping but ready. They did not move, did not fire, did not reveal themselves. They simply waited. For the order, for the spark, for the moment when silence would become fire. But silence is heavy. The weight of patience grows unbearable. Generals argued in secret councils. Admirals clenched their fists. Every family who had lost someone to alien cruelty demanded vengeance. The galaxy thought humanity was quiet because they were afraid. But the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity was quiet because they were patient. And patience, when it finally breaks, becomes wrath beyond imagination. On the anniversary of the Andros 4 massacre, Commander Kale stood before the High Council of Earth. The chamber was silent, filled with leaders, soldiers, scientists, and survivors. He looked into their eyes and spoke only 3 words. Words that would echo into history. It is time.